everybody. I'm Tracy Tucker, and welcome to the Who is in My Genes podcast, where we share adventures in exploring family trees, including tips for researching your own family tree, stories about discoveries, DNA testing and matches, and lots about adoptee searches and advocacy, because we believe everyone has a right to know who is in their genes. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about adoptee rights. If you think you're not interested in this topic, that's fine, but I encourage you to give me a few minutes at least, because my bet is you have opinions. And there is a story in here, I promise. First, some good news from the state of Georgia for adoptees. Currently, Georgia restricts access to original birth certificates. If you are not familiar with that term, an original birth certificate, or OBC, is the birth certificate issued to all babies born that includes at least their birth mother's name on it, sometimes the birth father's name as well. When someone is adopted, they are issued a new birth certificate with their adopted name and adopted parents' names. And in the case of closed adoptions, the original birth certificate is sealed, meaning it's made private by the state and hidden away in a file somewhere so you can't find it. Currently in Georgia, only if the birth parents have filed an unrevoked written consent will their names be released upon the request of an adoptee age 21 or older, or the adoptee's child age 21 or older if the adoptee is deceased. However, the Georgia State Senate recently unanimously passed a bill called Andy's Law, ANDEE, to restore the rights of Georgia state adoptees to access their original birth certificates without restrictions or conditions. On the last day of their 2025 session, which was April 2nd, last week, the Georgia House passed it by a vote of 145 to 14. Governor Brian Kemp has 40 days to sign the bill and is expected to do so, and it would be effective on July 1st of this year. So hooray for Georgia. If you happen to live in Georgia and want Governor Kemp to sign it, please take a few minutes to contact his office and ask him to do that. Utah also recently passed a bill to open these records for adoptees over the age of 18, unless the birth parents have requested the records remain sealed through a court order. This bill goes into effect on November 1st of this year, so at least some adoptees in Utah may be able to get their records. Virginia also currently has a bill, HB 2093, but it's currently stalled in the Committee on Education and Health. If you live in Virginia and want to voice your support of this bill, there are more details on the Bastard Nation website. Yes, that is actually what it is called. Their website is bastards.org. I'll put a link in the show notes. Bastard Nation is a nonprofit advocacy group for the civil and human rights of adult citizens who were adopted as children. Let me read part of their mission statement to you. We advocate the opening to adoptees, upon request at age of majority, of those government documents which pertain to the adoptee's historical, genetic, and legal identity, including the unaltered original birth certificate and adoption decree. Bastard Nation asserts that it is the right of people everywhere to have their official original birth records unaltered and free from falsification, and that the adoptive status of any person should not prohibit him or her from choosing to exercise that right. We have reclaimed the badge of bastardy placed on us by those who would attempt to shame us. We see nothing shameful in having been born out of wedlock or in being adopted. I have mentioned some of this before, but in the United States, Today, there are only 15 states offering adult adoptees unrestricted access to their own original birth records. Alabama, Alaska, Connecticut, Colorado, Kansas, Louisiana, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, South Dakota, and Vermont. Several other states have partial access, including Ohio, where I was born and adopted. The Adoptee Rights Law Center divides the states up into 3 categories: unrestricted, which are the 15 I just mentioned; compromised, which means some adoptees can access their records under certain conditions, of which there are 19 states; and restricted, meaning adoptees have no rights except through a court order, of which there are 17 states. If you are not adopted or are not closely related to adoption and are asking right now, what's the big deal? Let me propose this. Say you were raised by your grandparents. They provided a great home for you and everything, and you had a happy childhood. But you knew they were your grandparents and not your parents. As you got older, you asked them about your parents, and they said, no, you can't have that information. Not even their names? No. You're a kid. What can you do? What if you waited until you were 18, a legal adult, and asked again? No, you can't have that information. Why? Because we said so. You wait until you're 21 and ask again. No, you can't have that information. Why? Because we said so. Now, these are your grandparents. They have the information. I mean, one of your parents is their own child, but they won't tell you. How does that make you feel? Does it infuriate you? Why, even as an adult, would you not have the right to know who they are? As your grandparents, though, they can fill in a lot of the details. You have your biological history, you know your ethnic ancestry, you can build your family tree starting with your grandparents, so you mostly know where you came from. Now imagine removing your grandparents from that equation. You were raised by a family who loved you and took care of you, but they were no biological relation to you. They likely had little to no detail about where you came from or who your parents were, let alone any details about your ancestors or their stories. Taking this back to state laws, all 50 states have the information about who the birth parents, or at least the mother, are. 17 states say, no, I won't tell you. Take me to court, and then maybe I'll tell you, but still probably not. So spend money on a lawyer and waste weeks or months going to court to get your own birth records. And if you're lucky, maybe we'll give them to you, depending on the judge. 19 states say, well, I'll give this person their own records, but not that person. Or, we'll give you your information, but only if the birth parents say it's okay. So ironically, we'll ask your mommy if we can tell you who she is, but if she says no, tough luck, kid. It really is outrageous. Even though I now know my story, there are still 7 weeks missing from my life. 7 weeks that I have no idea where I was or who was taking care of me, let alone how I was being taken care of. Can you imagine missing 7 weeks of your life? Don't get me wrong. There are many, many positive aspects of adoption. I am not anti-adoption at all. What I am opposed to is the cover-up, the stripping of the adoptee's cultural, familial, and genetic heritage before they can provide any consent. Identity crisis, anyone? You're disconnected. You're floating. There's no red string tying you to your roots. Some adoptees show nowhere from this. Others felt out of place for as long as they can remember. Many adore their adoptive families and grow and thrive and are successful in life. But there are studies, including some published by the National Library of Medicine, that show adoptees have higher rates of substance use disorders than non-adoptees. This includes higher odds for alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, cocaine, amphetamine, hallucinogen, opioid, and other drug abuse and dependencies. I wonder how much knowing who their biological parents or families were or what their story was would impact this. Maybe not at all, but I do wonder. Now, small children and even some teenagers may not be able to handle their story, depending on what that story is. But adults should have the right to know where they came from, how they came to be, the families they are connected to by blood, if for no other reason than to know they have a family they are connected to by blood. I can't tell you the peace I have had since finding my own biological families. It's not even necessarily in the knowing of the people individually. It's the knowing of who my people are, of being able to trace my roots, my blood, back through my ancestors and building my own family tree. I've built the trees of my adoptive parents too, and they sure are interesting. But I don't feel connected to them in the same way I do with my biological family trees. Now, some of you may be saying that biological parents have rights too. And you know what? They sure do. They have a right to privacy. They have a right to keep their secrets. But when it comes to their children, that child they relinquished for any number of reasons, which is also their right, at what cost comes their right to privacy. Allowing adult adoptees to access their own birth records is not making anything public. The names of parents are not being published or announced anywhere. Their names are being provided, and in many cases, it's only the mothers, not the fathers, to the child. Why does a person's right to privacy trump the right of another to know who they really are? That's one of the reasons I named my business Who Is in My Genes. Adoptees were not delivered by Stork nor hatched from some mysterious egg. No matter who raises you, who you call family or mom or dad or brother or sister or grandma or auntie, no matter what holidays you celebrate, foods you love, country you live in, your genes, your blood is something that was given to you by the two people who created you biologically and those who came before them, and that will never change. Every single human being deserves to know who those people were. I'd like to mention today that I help adoptees who have taken a DNA test try to figure out how they are related to their matches, specifically trying to identify their birth parents. If you fall into this group or know someone who does, please go to our website for more information and submit the contact form if you want my help. Also, if you're building a family tree and want a poster, we have some very easy to use PDFs available in our Etsy store that you can buy for less than $5 each. I think they're $4.92 or something like that. And each one can display up to 5 or 6 generations. There's a variety of backgrounds, including our branded Who Is in My Genes family tree that's on the homepage of our website, along with some nature scenes and some country flags, including Canada, Scotland, Ireland, and Italy. If you don't see what you want, send us a message in the Etsy store and we'll see if we can create what you need. They are super easy to use, and you can print them at home or send them to a local printer like FedEx to print as many copies as you want. Have fun. Thank you for listening to the Who Is in My Genes podcast with me, Tracy Tucker. If you enjoyed it, please give us a great review to help others find the show, and follow us to get notified of new episodes. Visit us online at whoisinmygenes.com for all the ways we can help you find out who is in your genes, and follow us on Instagram for the images we mention in the show. Links are in the show notes. Join us next week for a new episode of Adventures in Exploring Family Trees.